guys, it's Amy at Zoe back, and I'm going to do my weekly reading update for July 14th, 2019. So, I got a lot of stuff read this week because I was reading too many books at one time. It was a long week. I had a lot of overtime. My mom came to stay with me one night, so that she could do stuff with my grandmother. And it's just like, it was a long week. But I'm still like stunned. We're at the middle of July already. How did that happen? Anyway, so I'm going to talk about the books that I read and the ones I'm in the middle of, and then the ones I think I'm going to read after that. We'll see. So I was doing a read along this last week, and it kind of messed with my reading. I don't read what, like how some people call it on the dark side. I usually read one book and maybe an audiobook at the same time. So it is very rare for me to be reading more than two technically books at a time, because I just don't. I want to see the progress of my reading a little quicker than what it felt like this week. So this week it felt like it dragged all the books for days, because I was reading parts of them and not reading them full out, like, I don't know. There's just something about that mentality for me. It bothers me that I felt like, even though I got all the other things done, because I finished a lot of them this week, I felt like I didn't make a lot of progress until the end of the week. So anyway, so I'll start with the books that I finished. The first book I finished was Longbourn by Jo Baker. I am participating in Jane Austen July, which is put on by Katie at Books and Things and Marissa at Blatantly Bookish. Longbourn is one I heard a lot about last year. I think I picked this up at a library book sale either right after that or right before that. I'd heard about it when I first kind of joined BookTube. So I've been meaning to read this for a couple of years. It is a retelling of Pride and Prejudice from the viewpoint of the servants of the house. And I think it's a really well done story in the way that really you only get little glimpses of what happens in Pride and Prejudice in there, but you get mostly about the servants' lives and their backstories and their, hopes and dreams and how they deal with things. And it's a very great way of looking at the divisions in class of kind of what it was like for those servants that worked at Longbourn for the Bennets. And I think it was it also had stuff about the military, and it had stuff about social things, about what people could and couldn't do and stuff. And it was I think overall this is really well done. I liked the main character. She's supposed to be about the same age as Elizabeth, but she's had a much different life. So, but I do like Sarah. I did think she was an interesting character. I think once or twice I was like, I'm not sure I really think that was the greatest idea of what she did. But overall, I liked her. James, I just loved. Like, if I had to do that mid-year freak out tag again and said who had a crush, I had a crush on James. I don't know. There's something about him, and I really shouldn't. I mean, no, he's a good character. I don't know why. My heart went out to him. I guess that's it. He just touched my heart, and I just love James in this book. And so I do recommend this if you want to do a retelling of Pride and Prejudice. And again, that was one of the prompts for Jane Austen July, is to read a retelling. And I really enjoyed this more than I actually thought I would. I was kind of worried at first of how I would react to that, because sometimes I don't like retellings of things I love. And again, Pride and Prejudice is like my favorite book of all time, and I was kind of worried, but I liked it because it really didn't focus a lot on Pride and Prejudice. It was mostly about the characters, although they're great. It was the glimpses and the things that happened. I think it was really well done, the way she meshed it together. I think it was a really well done book. I then finished listening to the audiobook of Sense and Sensibility by Jane Austen. I think the audio narrator was Rosamund Pike. It was really good. I really enjoyed that. I'm glad I picked that up on a daily special one time for Audible. I had not read Sense and Sensibility since college, so it's been quite a long time. But I read it several times. Like, I read it when I was a teenager, and then I read it early 20s for college. And again, I wrote a lot of papers on Jane Austen. She was my focus for my graduate, my undergrad degree. So cause I didn't go on, sorry guys, I'm at my undergrad, my bachelor's, whatever, however you want to say it. I wrote my paper on her, not on this book, but I mean, but you had to read, anyway, never mind. Point is that I hadn't read this probably since then, because, really the only Persuasion and Pride and Prejudice I've read multiple times, but none of the other ones have I really read a lot. So it was really good to get back to this one. I can see why it's not one of my favorites. Again, I have trouble with Mary Ann. She just drives me crazy as a character, partly because of her age and partly because of her stance on things. Like, I don't know, but I loved this book more than I remembered. Like, I think listening to it, you could hear the moments of genius of what I love about Jane Austen's writing in there. It's there. It's just in a story that's not my favorite. So I think it's a much quieter novel to me than the novels that I enjoy more. But I do, I don't know. I think it's still really well done, and still definitely, if you, Jane Austen, like any Jane Austen, you should read this at some point. I think it's really well done, and I can recommend that audiobook. I really, really enjoyed that, because Thursday night I got home and I had like 2.5 hours left, and I'm like, oh no, I'm just finishing this. I'm done. I'm close to the end. I need to let it play out. And so I played on my iPad doing the like one of those coloring apps while I listened to this. It was awesome. And then I went and had dinner. But the point is that I needed to get this done. So I really enjoyed this, and I'm glad I reread this. Katie and Marissa are hosting, I think, read along was for the first half of the month on this on Goodreads. I did not join that, only because to me it was a reread, so I wasn't, it's more for me, just because, again, I studied this. I did a lot of stuff with this back in college. It's been many, many years. I just wanted to kind of dive into it on my own. And so but it was one of their read-along books for Jane Austen July. They are now, I think that was through today. And then they're now going to read Northanger Abbey. But I read Northanger Abbey last year, so I'm not participating in that part of Jane Austen July, because I'm going to read another one later this month. But I'm really glad I bought that. And I can tell that I bought this in college, because this has the tag from a bookstore that was near my grandma's house in Minnesota, and that no longer exists. It's called The Constant Reader, and that tag is still here. So I obviously bought this in college. Anyway, oh, I am really talking a lot here, guys. Okay, so I finished The Hunchback of Notre Dame, or Notre Dame du Paris, by Victor Hugo. This is translated by John Sherrock, and I really enjoyed this. This was a read-along put on by Mara at Books Like Whoa. I kind of rearranged my whole reading around this, because, again, I knew I was going to do Jane Austen July. I mean, I've known that since last year. If they had put it up that we were going to do Jane Austen July again, I was already ready for it. But this kind of came out of the blue last month, that she was going to do this, and I was like, oh, well, I've never read Victor Hugo. I have Les Mis on my shelf, and I've always wanted to read that, clearly, since I bought the book back in 2003 from Borders. I haven't read it yet. So, but I do want to read that. But I was like, oh, well, this is a shorter book of his, and, you know, it's another famous, or, you know, a classic one. So I thought I'd get that. So I did get a copy of this, and I am so glad I did, and I joined the read-along. I mean, this book was a lot different from what I thought it would be. Again, a lot of us maybe saw the Hunchback of Notre Dame Disney movie. Yeah, this isn't really a lot like that. I mean, maybe it is, but I don't know, it's been so long since I saw that. I think I saw it when it came out. I don't think I've seen it since. So I don't really remember the cartoon. And I didn't see any of the old adaptations of this either. It's not a story that I was attracted to. I mean, again, The Hunchback of Notre Dame, the title is, when it was translated to English, they made it that way. It was really Notre Dame du Paris when Victor Hugo published it in French. So again, this takes place in Paris, and the cathedral at Notre Dame, and Quasimodo, of course, lives there, and it's his sad story. It's Esmeralda, who is a young gypsy girl who doesn't, who's living on the street and trying to make it by on her dancing and singing in the streets, and her little goat. And of course it's the Archdeacon Claude, and who's obsessed with her, and then a couple other male characters are just like, what the hell? Anyway, so overall I really liked this. As I said, it was super sad, yes, in the end. It was, it was pretty much I would say a tragedy kind of thing by the end. But the build-up was so weird, like you didn't know where you're going. The characters introduced in the beginning, some of them come back into the end, but you're like, where were they in the middle? But it was such a commentary on Paris is really what this was. This was written in 1831, and it's taking place in 1482. So I read a historical fiction classic. So that's pretty much the only historical fiction I read this year is 2 French classics that were historical fiction. I am not doing well on that whole reading through the ages. Anyway. Anyway, so this is, it was a different time period, and again, it's talking about the glory of the cathedral and what Paris looked at that time, and it was pretty much Hugo's commentary on how by 1830, they were tearing down all the things that were, that had been built in this time, and that they were destroying their history, and he was, concerned about that. So, I mean, pretty much this actually helped them restore the cathedral after this, because people started visiting it. So it's kind of cool that the book actually worked for that. But again, he takes time out of the story to give us these little lectures. So you have to be a little prepared for that. And I knew that going into Les Mis, I was going to get that. I did not know I was going to get that so much in here, because I didn't know enough about this one. I did like the chapter that talked about how he thought that the printing press actually killed architecture in the way that all the geniuses were going into other fields after the printing press had made it possible for books to be printed and things. They didn't have to go and put their big works as in buildings and architecture. They now could do it in a book form. And it was a really interesting conversation. I thought his thesis, it worked out pretty well. I was still surprised by it in the middle of the book. But overall, the story itself is really action-packed once you get into it. Unfortunately, again, you get a couple little lectures. But I think this will be really good on a reread. Like, I'm kind of already thinking, I'm going to give it 5 or 10 years, and then I might go back and reread this just because I think I might get more out of it the second time around. Because again, I did go into this pretty blind and only knowing about the Disney movie a little bit and not remembering a lot about that. As I said, it went in ways I wasn't expecting, and I really did enjoy it. And I think I would recommend this, especially since it's only about 500 pages. It's not, especially my translation is really well done. I got this one because there's a translator. There are some other editions I could have picked up that are anonymous, and I admit it, I'm one of those people who knows too many people who are translators in their jobs to buy books that are anonymously translated. I cannot do it anymore. I definitely want to make sure that I pick up books that have a translator's name on it. So I know there's some other really cool editions, but I picked up the one that had a name on it. So, and I think he did a really good job. I really liked this. I think it was well done. Anyway, so okay, I've talked about that a lot. I also picked up another Jane Austen. This is one of my nonfiction picks for it. I got this at the library week before last. And this is At Home with Jane Austen by Kim Wilson. So this is a really nice book that has really pretty pictures. Some of those are paintings. Sorry about that. Of course, I pick up the one there were some really nice ones in here of, but like lime. And then so it's pretty much talking about Jane Austen's life and the places that she lived and went to and stuff. And it's really a really pretty book, as well as has a lot of good information. So I think this, if you want a shorter book on Jane Austen, on her life and where she lived and her family, you know, how they moved around and why and things. This really has all the information you need. This is just a really quick guide to it. I mean, it's about 140 pages. And again, I would say a third of them are pictures. So it still took me time to read because there's some of the writing is like double paged, you know, or double line, you know, double rows. So it did take some time, and I think it was really well done, and it was really pretty. And again, so I just picked it up at my library. I was picking up a couple other history books, or, you know, biography-like books on Jane Austen. That was one of them that just popped up when I was looking at other ones. So, but as I now go into the books that I'm in the middle of, I really shouldn't have picked up that book at the same time as this one. So I did finish At Home with Jane Austen yesterday. And now I'm reading, or I've been listening to this since Friday, so I had kind of both at the same time. And they both cover some of the same things. This one is much more in depth. This is Lucy Worsley's biography of Jane Austen. Again, it's using the same things as by where she was living as focus points. But really we're getting her whole life story. So I did try to read this either last July or last November. I can't remember if it was for Jane Austen July or Nonfiction November, but I did try to read this, and at the time it was too dense for my brain at the time, or I just decided to put it off and I'd do it later, or get it on audio. Well, my library does have one on Overdrive, but I've never been able to get it, so I finally just bought it from Audible this week, and so I started listening to this, and I am only about 75 pages in. Yeah, and it's, you know, it's good. It's about 320 pages. So, you know, I'm about, what would that be? I don't know, 20%, 30, 25%. Anyway, so I'm not very far. So, I'm doing pretty good for a couple of days. So I'm hoping to listen to this throughout the week. So, yeah, I don't remember how much. I think I have 8 or 9 hours left on this. So maybe more than that. I don't remember. I'm just not awake. Sorry, guys. So, but this I think is a really good, it's one that a lot of other people have recommended for Jane Austen July, and a lot of other people are picking this up as well. So I have wanted to read this one. I don't know if I'm going to pick up the other Jane Austen biography that other people are talking about. I think it's by Claire Tomlinson or something. I don't know, because this one's so good so far. So I'm going to listen to this, and then, you know, maybe another year I'll pick that one up. But I am enjoying that so far on audio, and I can't remember the narrator's name. Sorry, guys, I just can't remember. So after I finished Notre Dame de Paris, I picked up Evelina by Frances Burney. So this is a Jane Austen contemporary author of her time. So I wanted to. This is the first one I picked up. I think I had another one that I was looking at, but this one is one that she mentions. Well, she mentions Burney's writing in Northanger Abbey for sure, but this is an epistolary novel. So all letters of a young girl who got asked by a richer family to spend some time with them, to get close to their daughter, to be a companion, and then I think they're going to go to London. I'm only 25 pages in. That's all I read yesterday. That's about all I got as far. But I hear that this is, you know, maybe not the best thing, but it should be pretty interesting. And again, it's one of her contemporaries, and definitely somebody that she read and knew about. As I know from her biography that she's mentioned her. So I do want to read this next. I know a lot of other people are reading this too, so I think that might be another reason why I wanted to pick it up. I mean, so I bought this last year on the 4th of July. I remember specifically going to Powell's on the holiday to find this copy, and I had to go downtown to that location because they had the copy, and so I bought it then, and I still remember that. So it's been a year since I bought this book, so now I'm getting it read. So anyway, that's pretty good, right? A year. Oh well. Anyway, so I said I'm not very far into it. I don't know how I'll feel about it. Because it's about 400 pages, and as I said, I'm only like 25 pages in, so that might take me a lot this week. We'll see how much happens. And then another book that I found on my shelf that I didn't know I had, I forgot I had this, and that is Pride and Prometheus by John Kessel. So I got this last year. It's an ARC. I got it at my book club that I was going to at the time at PALS for science fiction fantasy. And they brought this out and I had to get it because it was a mashup between Pride and Prejudice and Frankenstein. So this is Mary Bennet, the middle sister in Pride and Prejudice, and Victor Frankenstein, but also the monsters in here. So it's really cool. So what the premises of this is like, it's like 10 or 11 years. I can't remember how many years. It's over 10 years since the end of Pride and Prejudice. Mary and Kitty are still unmarried, and they had been in line because at the beginning because Mary had kind of a prospect of somebody who was she was getting into fossils, and she and him were kind of bonding over this, and then something, he says something and she's like, oh no, this is not happening. So they are returning, I think, to London, where Victor has come over, and he is followed by the monster, and the monster is, of course, not happy because Victor Frankenstein has promised him his bride and has not delivered on that yet. So it's a very interesting mashup, but I just have to take a chance on it, and is that it was free. So I read one night about 40 pages of it, so I got into it enough to go, I do want to continue this, but I'm going to wait until after I get through Evelina. I think I want to focus on the classic first, and then I will read the fun stuff. And then after that, my goal is to read the last book of Jane Austen's fiction that I have to do, which is Lady Susan, the Watsons, and Sedition. I've read everything else of her fiction. This is the last stuff I have. I've read all her juvenilia, and I've read all her novels. So this is it. So I'm hoping to read all of this because it's not a huge book. It's just about 200 pages. And Lady Susan, I think, is pretty much a novella length. And then The Watsons is a novel that she abandoned. And Sedition was what she was writing when she passed away. So it is unfinished. So I'm kind of curious about how these are going to be. As I said, this is the last. I did purchase, that's coming to me, spoiler alert for my book haul next month or at the end of the month I bought the selected letters of Jane Austen. So I got the Oxford edition. I think I saw that Katie at Books and Things had, and I thought, oh, you know what, now that I've listened and read some of the stuff from the At Home with Jane Austen and Jane Austen at Home, they talk about her letters, and so I've read a few excerpts of it, but I've never read her letters. So that'll probably be the last thing I have of hers that I haven't got to. So anyway, but that's coming. But I don't know if I'm gonna get to that this month. I might save it for next year. Sorry about that. Also, I have to burp. Sorry. Anyway, so those are all the books I finished 4. I'm in the middle of 3, and I have one more kind of on the thing. I still have 3 other books that are in the wings to read after that. So those will probably be next week, because I'm pretty sure this is going to take me most of the week. So anyway, are you guys participating in Jane Austen July? How is your reading going? Have you read any of these, or have any comments about them? Did you guys do the Hunchback and Notre Dame read along with Mara at Books That Like Whoa? That I really enjoyed doing that book. But I am not a reader on the dark side. I'm kind of worried about what buddy reads I might do later this year on how we're gonna format them, because I don't know, it's so hard to read a set number in a book per day for me. I don't know. I'll have to see how this goes, but I'll try. I'm just gonna try not to read on the dark side very often at all. So anyway, I hope your guys' reading is going well, and I will talk to you guys later. Bye.